Hello and welcome to the Blue Monday podcast. We're on close season again, so I'm not going to go over the normal intro, but this is normally a 3 times weekly audio show and YouTube show. But you'll probably be noticing a new face on this side. This is the first of 4 season reviews. We were going to get together, but it didn't happen over half term. But that's quite good though, because we would have all just talked over each other. Anyway, so please welcome for his debut on the podcast. You've probably seen him on or heard him on the Naked Football Show. Welcome, Mr. Joe Fairs. Joe, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Ben.
Is that a 92, 93?
Yeah, 92 to 94, isn't it?
92 to 94. You didn't think of fastening the...
No. They do sort of distract my son, though, these ones now, so I'm lucky not to be strangled by it.
Try and strangle. So, Joe, can you just introduce yourself a bit to the viewers and the listeners? What's your vintage? When did you start supporting? And can you tell us a bit about your Football Manager stuff and your youth team kind of links and whatnot?
Yeah, well, I started going in the title-winning 91-92 season, but I was only 6 at the time, so I don't have that many memories of that season. And then I've basically had a season ticket since then, so sort of 25 years, 26 years now. I've seen the first few years were interesting. We used to have titles, relegation, staying up, playoffs every season, and then
loads of goals.
The last 15 haven't been as good. The last 5 or 6 years, I've run the Academy Twitter feed, which has involved going over to watch a youth team a lot, the under-23s, and keeping stats on that. And then from that, also do the Football Manager research for Ipswich Town. So if there's any issues with the stats or anything on that, I'm the guy that has got it wrong, effectively.
What's your strike rate like on Football Manager? Have you done any Mark Kerrs?
No, there's a lot of
just explain. Sorry, Joe. Explain what a Mark Kerr is to the uninitiated.
Basically, you find a player who's 18. You say they're going to be the best player in the world, and every time someone plays that game, he is your first signing that you do
for 60 grand.
Yeah, it's not quite as easy to do that these days because everyone knows everything these days. So if someone like Andre Dazelle, I can mark high, and everyone knows he's going to be a good player, and it doesn't raise any questions. But if I were to do it for someone that isn't in an England youth squad or isn't playing 2 or 3 years above themselves, it will be questioned as to why this guy that no one in the sort of community has heard of is the next Neymar.
Yeah, right. No, there have been a few fun ones, and I always remember there was someone massively. I think it wasn't Kieran Dyer. I always remember on one of the games there was someone like massively out of position. You could sign him from Ipswich, but play him in completely. I can't remember who it was, but we're going back like Championship Manager to. I had to stop playing Football Manager just purely because it took up too many hours of my life. Just quickly before we start, the plan today is we're dividing these. This is the season review that we've done as a roundtable the last couple of years. We're dividing it into 4. So Joe and I today are going to be going over, there's pretty much 50 games. So we're going to be going over the first 12. And then I think it's Mikey, then it's Statman, and then it's Dave for the glorious dethroning of Queen Cersei. Yeah. But just Joe, just quickly, because you've been a big Jack Ross proponent on Twitter, just give me quick thoughts on the appointment of Paul Hurst before we start.
Yeah, I'm really pleased with Paul Hurst. I like the sound of Jack Ross more. I thought he was going to be something different, where I think Hurst is a safer choice, but it's very difficult to argue with Hurst's record. Like I say, he's managed in every league, sort of the one below the Conference North, the Conference League 2, League 1, and he's had success in all those leagues, and he deserves the chance he's got. And it's nice to see, sort of in the national media, we were getting a lot of stick, the Ipswich fans, for hounding out McCarthy and be careful what you wish for, and you can't expect sort of anyone to do a job on the budgets that are set, and he's done a brilliant job. But it's nice to now see the national media saying it's good Ipswich are giving a young manager a sort of chance in the game, a chance to step up, giving someone who's deserved a chance their shot. So it's nice to have a change in narrative sort of at the clubs, because we were sort of getting a bit of brunt of some stick there. And I think he deserves his shot, and everything I've seen about him is positive. His sort of signings, the way he plays, it isn't going to be total revolution from Mick McCarthy, but maybe the fact we finished 12th last year with all the injuries and the squad and the fans and club not particularly united, it's probably a good thing that we've got a manager that can come in and pick up the squad he's got here and try and just evolve the play.
And I was discussing this with Dave the other day. Apart from Nuno, Jukanovic and Dean Smith, who else plays total
No.
football in the Championship anyway?
And I think Dean Smith at Brentford play total football. I think you could put anyone in charge there, and they they're told how they have to play effectively. So it's only really Jukanovic that has come in and really insisted on that style of play, where Nuno's come into Wolves and been given sort of Champions League caliber players. So they should be able to play good football, and they did. But.
Absolutely. Right. Let's get into this. So we'll do a little bit of the preamble just to set up the context. So let me take you back to Nottingham Forest away, last game of the 16-17 season. So the context is basically everyone wants the season to end. Forest could have scored about 5 goals in the first 5 minutes. We go down 3. Did we go 3-0 or 3-1?
3-0 it was in the end, yeah.
3-0 in the end, and everyone packs up for the summer. Away we go. A thoroughly depressing season. The lowest under. I'm going to use his name today because we're going back into the past, so it doesn't feel like. So the lowest finish under McCarthy's watch, 16th place. Thoroughly depressing. Murphy goes in August. No one really comes in. We're saved from relegation essentially by Tom Lawrence and Białkowski. So we go into the summer, and the conversations we're having on the podcast are, well, we don't think anyone's going to come in. Do you know? We can't see the owner putting his hand in his pocket. And so before the season starts, we have Joe Garner, Emir Hughes, Tom Adeyemi. And I won't pretend I knew anything about Bertrand Selena before he came. So, in your mind, before they started, obviously there's one more signing to come, but we'll come to him after the Birmingham game. What was your feeling on the signings, and did you feel a bit of a change there? Because that's more backing than there's been in a while.
Yeah, over the last few seasons, it didn't seem like we'd signed many first-team players. In Mick's first season, at the end of it, we brought in David McGoldrick, Daryl Murphy, Cole Skuse, all these players you expected to come straight in and start. After that, really, it's only really Białkowski and then that came in as a nailed-on starter. But he was fighting for his place with Gherkin also. And then there was sort of the signings of Ward and Webster, which were seen as first-team players, but also ones for the future.
Down the line, yeah.
We went out and we signed Joe Garner, who is sort of a nailed-on starter, Emir Hughes, who if fit is going to be a nailed-on starter, Tom Adeyemi, who seemed to be a nailed-on starter, and then obviously the lone players, Selena and Dominic Iorfa, who were good calibre players. So it really did seem like Mick was being backed, maybe not with fees as much when you sort of look down the line to see how much they actually were, but he'd been backed with some probably top-end earners in the squad.
Why did the narrative change as Mick was leaving? Why did it go from these cost this much to all of a sudden him saying, "Oh, I didn't pay anything for him"? Hughes was $250,000, and the two guys from Rangers were 500. Why did that happen?
I think the Rangers one he'd been quite open about from the start that we'd mugged them £1 million for the pair of them. But the Hughes fee, I'd heard at the time it was £250,000, and I'd said that to a few people, and everyone was like, "No, it's £1 million." But I think it had been reported it had been £250,000, but everyone, I think maybe people were happier to see that it was £1 million because it showed a bit more intent. And then as the season went on, Mick was then doing damage limitation for himself because he knew he was off from about.
He was on brand McCarthy, wasn't he?
About January, so he was having to show that these players that he brought in at the fees he's brought them in, and the reality is 1.25 million for Waghorn, Garner and Emir Hughes is amazing business. It had Hughes stayed fit last year, that you're talking 3 players that would have had a huge impact on the team.
And
2 that did.
Don't forget Adeyemi as well. I think he got double figures for Rotherham the season before. He wasn't playing box to box. He was quite an advanced attacking midfielder there.
He scored the win against us, didn't he, towards the end of the season?
Against our reserves, yeah.
Yeah. And he'd always been a player that impressed me when I'd seen him, and sort of you see the sides of him, and he's very mobile for his size, and that was one I was quite excited to see. And when he did play, he again played well, but he just picked up that illness on the pre-season tour that he took him a while to shift, and then he just seemed to be injured from that point onwards with a hamstring. But
Right, so off we go. We're not going to go to Birmingham first, Joe, because I went to Greenwich the week before
okay,
and I went to see Charlton Athletic versus Ipswich, and I went to see this wonderful guy called Flynn Downs that everyone had told me about, and I saw Ipswich come out and line up in a 4-4-2 in a friendly against Charlton with a pretty decent starting 11. I think Iorfa came off the bench, so he didn't start, and it's 6-1. It's 4-0 at half time. Ipswich totally collapse. I think the rest of the friendlies have been quite good. I think I remember Garner playing, but
yeah, I think Garner had scored 6 in 5 in pre-season. I'd been to a couple of games. I went to Gillingham the week before where we'd lost 2-1, which wasn't a great result or performance. And then we played a bit better midweek. I think it was Colchester midweek we played, and well, it was only 1-0, and it'd been a fair pre-season, some decent results, some decent performances. Garner was the man with the goals, and then we went to Charlton, and I'll let you sort of
oh my
say
God.
what went on there.
Well, they lost the plot, and like I say, it was for. I mean, I remember a set play going in for the first goal, but the two Smith and Chambers looked well off it, and I hadn't seen Downs play at this point, but it looked like Skews and Downs in centre midfield in a midfield four wasn't going to work either. At least Andre Dazelle came on and scored, but a real horrible collapse, which kind of put it all back. So away goes Mick, and I pull up in the car park for the first game of the season. It's not programs nowadays; it's Twitter. Everyone's on Twitter at 2 o'clock, and lo and behold, mind blown because we've been hoping for 3-5-2 for a while. And the first game of the season, he's going to go 3-5-2. Garner starting up front with Sears. Iorfa debut. Dazelle starting. What were your thoughts on that first team lineup going into the Birmingham game?
I was surprised at how much it changed from pre-season because, like you said, last year it seemed free at the back could suit us because we had to seem to have the personnel for it, but there just wasn't a hint of it throughout pre-season at all that was the way we were going to go. And then when it came to it, that first game of the season, I'd imagine the Charlton just meant back to the drawing board.
Yeah, he
And
screwed it up, didn't he, and just
it was just free it
restarted.
back. And I was quite pleased to see it personally because like I say, we had Spence and Iorfa, and I think Spencer deserved to play, and Iorfa was presumably a decent money signing that needed to come in and get some minutes as well. It allowed Andre Dazelle to have that freer role in the midfield where he's going to struggle in the two in there, but it allowed him to get onto the ball and start playing, or that was a plan, and that was how it played out for the first 45 minutes. So I was pleased with it personally.
So you've already mentioned it, and it must have been just on half time. I think Dazelle went in for a 50-50 with, I think it was Che Adams up one end of the pitch, and
Yeah.
then a minute or two later there's a corner up the other end, and he obviously did the damage on the first one. And what happened, Joe?
Yeah, but he'd had a bit of treatment on the first challenge, sort of towards the halfway line, and I think it was just a corner that got cleared, and as he turned to chase the ball, he just went down in a heap, and there was no one really around him, and then there was a lot of treatment, and he went off, and you could tell it was a hugely serious injury from the second it happened because he was on the stretcher. There was no one around him when it happened, and those things generally tend to mean ligaments, and when it's your knee ligaments is serious, and it was such a shame because he'd gone away to the Euros in the summer. He'd been a part of the England team that won the Euros, playing a year above himself. He's still eligible to play in it this summer if he wanted to, and he'd come back flying. And I think it took a little while to get into the game, but by that point everything was starting to go through him. He was picking up the ball from the defenders, which is something we haven't seen any midfielder do under Mick, and he was obviously given that license to do that and was getting it going. And then from that point on, we didn't really see a midfielder do that again until sort of the last 4-5 games of the season this year.
Absolutely. And I don't know if it's too fanciful a comparison. The one I've kept using on the pod is you saw the improvement Maddison made for Norwich through the
Mm.
season. And my hope was, I'm not saying that the end point would be the same with Dazelle and Madison, but immediately you lose that kind of blue chip young player. But Flynn Downs comes in and plays very well in the second half, and we get the winner. I don't remember. I think it was reasonably late in the game, wasn't it? Garner gets the
Yeah, I don't think it was long after half time. I can't remember.
So Garner gets the winner from Knudsen cross, and this is a feature of the. We'll find out. Knudsen assists, but all in all, a pretty good start against the kind of Birmingham team that had pinched a couple of. Excuse me, pinched a couple of Brentford. Oh no, they hadn't pinched them yet, but we thought
They brought in a lot of players.
Harry Redknapp was going to. They got the guy Roberts from Barnsley for like 3 million as well, hadn't they?
Yeah.
And spent a fair bit. So all in all, I think a good start. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think it was important we did get a good start across those first few games because when you looked at the fixture list, we were starting with like Birmingham, Barnsley, Millwall, and it's like we needed to pick up points from those games. So to get that win on the first day of the season was really key and really important.
So off we go to Luton, which McCarthy described as the hardest game of the season, the League Cup game after the first game. And we got a vague idea of how he might use McGoldrick this season, that he might drip him in and out. We got the first look at Burson Selina as well, and we're all been told he's a winger, and he starts down the middle with McGoldrick. But in between those 2 days, another signing, and Waghorn had come in as well. Did you know anything about Waghorn when he signed?
Only sort of what he'd done at Sunderland and Reading, or Leicester, sorry. I knew he wasn't I thought he wasn't a particularly a goal scorer. I knew he was a hard worker and sort of had a good left foot on him, and harried defenders everywhere. But I didn't think his goal scoring record was that good. And he'd obviously had a really good record at Rangers, but a lot of that was in the Championship up in Scotland, where Rangers are expected to steamroll everyone every week. So it's hard to gauge from that. But I was pleased with the signing. I thought as a fourth striker he really did complement what we had well, but I was still worried where the goals were going to come from because Garner, McGoldrick and Sears, none of those were sort of real goal scorers.
No. So we wait about 20 minutes of the Luton game. Selina doesn't touch the ball, and then all of a sudden we see this ridiculous acceleration, and you're like, oh, okay, have we got another Tom Lawrence here? It's a brilliant assist for McGoldrick, and then McGoldrick gets the second goal. Waghorn makes his debut, actually plays behind the front two when he comes on. But just before half time, we had Dazelle go in the first game. Adam Webster gets injured as well. So a few things to talk about there. Talk to me about how you saw McGoldrick being used at this stage, Selina possibilities, and just the start of this ridiculous injury run.
Well, McGoldrick, he just looked like he was sort of bang on form straight away there. He hadn't started against Birmingham on the first day, but like I say, he had 2 chances against Luton and took them both really well. He looked sharp, he looked ready, and it's like there just had to be a way to get him into the team effectively at that point because he's too good to leave on the bench. Sorry, what was it? The other question was Selina.
Selina, yeah.
Selina, I'd like the look of him. I'd seen him at Gillingham, and he just looked so fast and so direct. And a player like that, it was always going to have good games and bad games. But when they can win games and score goals out of nothing, you really need to try and find a place for them in the team, like Tom Lawrence had done the season before. Yes, he might not always do the right things defensively. Yes, he might frustrate you, but also when he can put the ball into the sort of top corner from 25 yards or go on a run and take 4 defenders out in one move, then you need to find a way to get that player into the team, which Mick did at times and subsequently didn't after that. But it took him a long while to get going on that. Injuries, Webster's was a fairly poor challenge. That was right in front of the away end. He got caught late there, and I think what that said about the injuries wasn't so much we're going to get a lot of injuries. It was Webster, he's injured and he'll be back after the international break. The international break comes round, and then all of a sudden the injuries change from sort of out for 2.5 weeks to he's out for another 8 weeks from here, and that just seemed to be the story of, or it has been for the last maybe 2 or 3 seasons of all our injuries. Every time somebody's nearly back, they're then they're then off for another 6 weeks. The only person that hasn't affected is Luke Chambers, who seems to be the
Yeah,
bionic man.
he's
He's out for
not a
six
normal
weeks.
human,
And
is he? Yeah, back
1 week
in
later,
two.
sort of back in the team. But we had
Um,
it even this year with Hyam, Addy Amy. They were both playing for the reserves in September, but it took them a long while to actually get fit enough to play.
for those who we know we're not going to go over the whole McCarthy saga again, but for those who criticise his cautiousness, if that's a word, caution, over caution, does that the Selena and Tom Lawrence thing, does that kind of sum McCarthy up a little bit, whereby the only way he trusted them in a team was there had to be up front, away from wide positions where they had to do any defence. It looked like he judged Selena based on Lawrence the season before, where he figured out that, oh, hang on a minute, this really fast guy with a really hard shot, if I stick him up front, he scores loads of goals. Is there anything in that?
Well, there was a number of games where Selena sort of got the hook sort of before. Maybe he deserved it, and there was other players, and it's Mick was always of the line, oh, he was doing us more damage than he was doing them. So it's like he's soon found out if it wasn't his day, if there was a couple of passes going astray in his own half. And I don't know, the style we played under Mick was very, very direct, very percentage football. And if you've got the ball in the left back area, all Mick wants the ball to be from there is as far away from his goal as possible. Not pass inside to try and get the ball back to try and actually attack from there. It's to try and get a throw in down the other end or box them back and then work from there. So it must be difficult for Selena, who's sort of playing for a parent club who have 70% of the possession, and there's no way you'd hoof the ball at Man City. You'd probably get sort of your contract ripped up if you playing for a pet team, where it's the opposite here. But I'm sure he learnt a lot from the loan spell, but I'm not sure that Mick got the best out of him generally.
Very good, very good. Off we go to Barnsley. Barnsley are going to play old school 4-4-2. Ipswich stick with the 3-5-2, but McGoldrick and Waghorn both stay on the bench, and it's Sears and Garner up front. Barnsley start really well and are absolutely all over us. We get into half-time 1-0 down. Kenlock, Nydam and Downs all started this game, but Kenlock and Nydam both get the hook at half-time. And I think this is one of those games where we criticise him for his football, we criticise him for a lack of philosophy, but there were certain times in game where McCarthy won the game just purely by his clever management. So and all of a sudden, we stumble across this ridiculous 4-4-2 system where we basically are going to play four forwards. So the young guys come out at half-time, Kenlock and Nydam. On come McGoldrick and Waghorn. So Waghorn plays on the right of midfield, Sears plays on the left of midfield, and McGoldrick goes up front with Garner. And Joe, what the hell happens in the second half?
Well, the two substitutes come on, score the goals. Mick looks like a genius, and that day he probably was one.
To be fair, that was brilliant. To be fair to him, yeah, that was brilliant. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I always think Mick wants to get his best 11 players on the pitch and for them to work it out. And on a day like that, you can see why he does that. When Nydam and Kenlock are struggling, Kenlock was particularly getting badly overrun down his side in the first half. You bring on McGoldrick, bring on Waghorn, two quality players for the two inexperienced kids, and from that point on, we just looked like we were going to score every time we went forward at that point. And Waghorn took his goal excellently, and that was a sort of sign of things to come, really, from him.
And the first sign of his directness, I was in the, I would get loads of stick for this, I was in the Barnsley stand on the halfway line as usual. And as soon as Garner got the ball, all Waghorn did, it wasn't clever, he literally just sprinted at the goal. Garner played it ahead of him, he took one touch and smashed it in, and I'm like, oh, okay.
It reminded me of Martin Royster, almost, just no backlift, just takes a shot so early that the ball sort of passed him before the keeper set his feet.
Right in the corner as well. So, yeah. So, great comeback. And all of a sudden, Joe, you've won 2 away games and your opening game. We didn't lose any players then, but we're still...
Well, just before that game, Tommy Smith was injured between Luton and that game, and he was out for another 8 weeks at that point. So.
Oh, okay. I hadn't got that one down. Yeah. So off we go to Millwall for one of the games of the season. This is another midweek one, Saturday, Tuesday. Um, we stick with the ridiculous 4-4-2 with four forwards on, and they all start this time. So McGoldrick and Garner are up front. Sears is in. Waghorn starts. Ward starts as well. So massively attacking team. There's too much to say. It's 2-2 at half time. I think Millwall score after 1 minute. Then Ward sets up. No, Garner scores the Millwall goalkeeper was rubbish all season, wasn't he? Garner
Yeah.
puts one through Archer's hands. Then Millwall score again. Then Waghorn scores. Then McGoldrick does one of the best assists I've ever seen, where he takes it around the goalkeeper with about 1 yard of space, squares it to Waghorn. Then we're hanging on for the entire second half. They bring Tom Elliott on, who's about 6'9", and score. Then we break away. Free kick curled in for Spence, who heads in the 88th minute. The other thing as well is Chambers injures himself after, you've already mentioned, after about 20 minutes, and then plays on injured for the whole game. Complete basket case of a match. What were your memories of that one?
That was a game that was just almost impossible to watch. It was just every time we went forward, we scored. I think that was one at this point in the season. We'd scored nearly every shot on target we'd had.
Yeah, right.
We were getting lucky, but none of the goals were outrageous goals. The only one that was like same as Garner's first, which was poor goalkeeping from sort of 25-30 yards. He hit that, and it was a simple save. But we just seemed to be flooding their box with numbers and actually scoring goals from it, and that is something that then sort of didn't happen for the rest of the season. We didn't get midfielders forward.
I think you summed it up though. It wasn't by design. It was him just putting his best 11 players on the pitch, and obviously Sears and Waghorn just had an instinct to just get in the box, didn't they?
Yeah, and Waghorn, everything he touched went in for the first sort of 2 months of the season.
Absolutely. So amazing win there. We've now lost Chambers though as well. So we go into the Brentford game. I think you pointed this out to me when we chatted on the phone the other day. Brentford had started really appallingly badly, and typical Brentford had 80% possession in every game and lost all of them. So we're going into this Brentford game with basically no centre backs, and I can't remember. I think the back four was Kenlock, Spence, Knudsen, and Iorfa.
Yeah, I think it was.
And again, very much like the Barnsley game, you have to say on this one, this is brilliant by Mick again, because the whole plan was really narrow and really deep, and hope they just play in front of us. And what were your memories of this one?
Well, as you said, hope that they'd play in front of us, and they did. They didn't really test bar. I think they hit the bar in the first half, but
yeah, the South African guy hit the bar, didn't he?
Yeah, that's all I could remember. But that looked like a shot that was going over. That all of a sudden, it hit the bar. I didn't expect it to go in at any point when he hit it. And then Waghorn scored a strange goal where everyone seemed to fall asleep, because I think they thought he was offside.
Yeah.
I think that people were appealing for a foul, and all of a sudden it was with Waghorn on the edge of the 6-yard box, and he rolled it in. And then, as Brentford started to look to get back into it after the second half, Garner scored the first goal line decision.
Oh, the watch. Yes.
Yeah. I wonder how many of those goals we've missed over the years, because it didn't look in from anywhere in the ground. And the ref held his watch up, and everyone celebrated. And at that point, it was game over. Brentford didn't look like getting back into it, and we just held them at bay. And we were 4 wins out of 4 in the league, and top of the league or second in the league at that point, and everything was looking rosy.
And you're looking at it from McCarthy's point of view. First game against Birmingham, he's gone 3 at the back and won. Second game against Luton, he switched around all the players and won. Third game against Barnsley, he's changed everything at half time and come back to win. Then against Millwall, he's gone with this ridiculous 4 forwards, 2 of them playing in midfield, and 1. And then a quite different approach, just saying, look, everybody tuck in, go narrow, go deep, and just worked an absolute charm. Everything management-wise he was doing as well was working out, wasn't it?
And that was without any centre backs, with sort of injuries in the midfield. at one point that month, I think we had 7 or 8 players, like genuine first teamers, out injured. In that, we had Chambers, Webster, Smith, Adeyemi, Dazelle, Hughes. So all those players were out, and we didn't look troubled almost in towards the end of the month.
So off we go to Crystal Palace away with, as you say, no players, and we get the youngest team in the history of world football ever. I can't remember all the names. You're probably better at this with your knowledge of the youth team, but I just remember walking up the hill to go into the ground and hearing the announcer going Van Aanholt, Cabaye, McCarthy, and like thinking if this is less than 5-0,
Mm.
this is a great result given I'd seen our team, but they were really good. So Gherkin is kind of a captain in goal, and Downs and no, Nyden played left back.
Yeah, Nyden
Um,
was left back.
and Downs was proper strutting around alpha male in that
Yeah,
team. Took Palace 76 minutes to score, and I think MacArthur. Was it MacArthur or McCarthy?
MacArthur.
I think he's a £15 million player, right? Playing against
Mm.
all these guys who've never played a pro game ever. You had Wolfenden against Andros Townsend, who was an England winger
Yeah, he'd come off the bench, hadn't he, Townsend? I
at
think.
one point. Takes Palace 76 minutes to score, and in the end, Morris slides one across for Selena to put in. I was really proud of them after that one. What did you think?
Again, that was another one where we may not have won that game as we had the previous 5, or yeah, 5 games it was at that point, but everyone walked away from that game feeling positive because we hadn't just rotated a few players, we had sat the whole squad down. I think the only player with any senior or proper senior experience was Gherkin, Danny Rowe, and Bursan Selena that
Rowe
played.
played, didn't he? Yeah.
It was the team you'd expect if we had an under 23 game that day, the team that would have played.
Yeah.
It was. I was pleased to see a proper rotation because sometimes it annoys me when a manager rotates and then they end up sort of taking the same players there, so they've still got to warm up, they've still got to be ready to go, and it's like, well, you haven't really given these players a rest. If you're going to give them a rest, give them a rest. Actually, properly do it. So I was pleased with how it went, and to hold that Crystal Palace side to 0-0 for 70 odd minutes was an incredible achievement from the boys. I know Gherkin did have to make a couple of good saves, but that is what your goalie is there for ultimately, and did that. And it was nice when it was 2-0 just to get a goal back as well, because that would have given them confidence as well. And at that point, the under 23s were flying in the league. They'd won their first 4 or 5 games, and it just seemed everything about the club was buzzing. We only had, I'd say, we had all these injuries, but yet we were top of the league. We'd put in a great performance in the League Cup, and it was sort of, where do we go from here? But ultimately, that was probably from that point onwards, the season went from there effectively.
Well, next up at Portman Road were everybody's favourite possession machine, Fulham. So Mick decides that the international break's coming up, and he's going to do exactly what he did against Brentford, against Fulham, play narrow and deep. Obviously, forgetting that Fulham have the best deep line playmaker in the league and the best attacking fullbacks in the league. And okay, we're top of the league and we've won a lot of games, but this was quite uncomfortable, this Fulham game, wasn't it?
I think Mick just gave all the senior players another game's rest because we didn't really turn up. It was we basically just it felt like we just waved the white flag there. We thought they were too good for us, so we acted like they were too good for us, and we just sat back, let them play all game, and it was 2-0. But we could have been playing for a year and not scored. It was one of those games. We just didn't even. It just didn't look like we even tried in that game. Admittedly, Fulham, as their promotion proved, were probably the best team in the league, I thought, on their day. And we were unlucky that Kearney was fit that day because he didn't seem to play much at that point of the season. He came in for that game.
His first game.
Yeah, and ran the show again.
115 passes, I think.
Yeah, but we just didn't get close to him. It was like we just allowed them to do exactly what they wanted to do, and they did it well. And that was frustrating that day because they hadn't started the season that well. I think they were in the bottom half at that point. We'd won all our games.
That was their first win, Joe, I think.
Yeah, and I'd say we could have. I say we might have gone for them and lost 4 or 5-0. I don't know, but when you're top of the league, when you've won all your games, when you're at home, it was a nice sunny day and a decent crowd there. You expect to have a go at them, not just to totally concede the game from the first minute.
So I think McCarthy had built himself up some credit with the other wins, and most people let that one go. But as you said, maybe a sign of some nasty things to come. So we go to the international break, and Callum Connolly comes in on loan from Everton, and we're told he's a fullback who can play either side. Off we go to QPR, and again we're getting negative now. I thought we were really bad against QPR. I thought we'd imprinted ourselves on a lot of the games so far, and QPR put three in midfield, Freeman, Luongo and Scowen, completely overran us. They had a nice balance in their midfield, and it's a pretty basic championship game where the team that work harder won, basically. And you now started to get the fans versus Mick starting over again, because Selena's off on the bench. Everyone chants for Selena. On he comes and scores the first of. Well, we did our goal of the season video, and it was basically just all Selena. But this, I mean, talk a bit about. This is not Fulham. This is QPR, isn't it? They're
Yeah.
nowhere. Talk a bit about this game and a bit about the fans and Selena, and using Selena as a bit of a political weapon both ways.
Well, it was just another game that I didn't feel we turned up for. The same as the Fulham game, we didn't turn up for this one, and with the sort of the crowd versus Mick McCarthy as it became during the season, I always feel the London away games are a barometer of the fans.
That was a big one. Sorry to interrupt you. That was a big one last year when he brought Douglas on instead of Dazelle, when we were level as well. Go ahead, sorry.
And when we were in the playoff season, we went to all these London away games. We won them all. We had 4,000 or 5,000 fans at Fulham, and same at Watford. And the London away games bring out a different type of fan. They bring out maybe the more hysterical, but the ones that create a better atmosphere when you're winning and a worse atmosphere when you're losing. And after we'd had the good start to the season, we were gone, and it's like, were these games a fluke beforehand, or was Fulham as it was going to be for the rest of the season where we're going to struggle? And we went there, we barely had a shot in the game. Selena, we'd seen, is someone that can make something happen, and he just sat on the bench for 80 minutes, and then when he came on, he did score. And you had the same question again. Well, why did he come on so late? Because we needed to get back into the game, and we weren't getting back into the game. Nothing was happening. And he came on and skipped past a few players, scores a goal, and you think, oh, had you done that with 10 minutes left, we might have made a decent finish of this.
So we go on, and we get a little bit of respite now because it's Bolton. Bolton had a horrible start because their transfer embargo hadn't ended. They were injury ravaged and they hadn't got a single point. So Bolton to come to Portman Road, back to 3-5-2, and thankfully Chambers comes back. Connolly goes in at wing back. Tom Adeyemi makes his first start. So a lot happens here, and as rare as hen's teeth, a Cole Skew's goal, a David McGoldrick winner late on. I remember the first half being one of those awful that we had under McCarthy. Ones where I'm just like yelling at the pitch, just saying, anyone do three passes, one pass to a blue shirt, and I'll be happy. Talk to me about any of those things, Joe. Bolton at home, 2-0.
This was a difficult game because you can't win in this game. You have to beat Bolton. They're bottom of the league. They didn't have a point at the point, and you have to beat them. And we did beat them. We made hard work of the first half, but then Skew scored the goal, and they didn't look like getting back into it. And then I think it was a very late goal from Goldrick to finalise it. But it was one of those games which Portman Road has seen a lot over the last 2 or 3 years, which was just instantly forgettable. We did a professional job and we got the points, but it was it was not one for the neutrals. I think I just pulled out a quote from Mick on this one. There was only 14,164 at the game, which is one of the sort of at the end of the season that had been a decent attendance, but at this point it was a worry. But he came out after the game when quizzed on it, saying, "I can't make people go to the games. I can only try to affect the results." And I think he had a view that if we were to start winning games, the fans would come back. The only thing he could do to get the fans back was to start winning games. And we were winning games. We were up in the top six, and yet the fans still weren't coming back. So at this point, it seemed like the penny was dropping with Mick. I think Cole Skuse came out and said something later on as well about we hope the fans will come back if we keep winning games. But at that point, it was obvious that it was too far gone with Mick for the fans, unless we were to be in the top six at the very end of the season.
That's a very, very interesting day to kind of point out for all the reasons that you've just said. Bit of a watershed. Away you go to Leeds. So Leeds are at this point top of the league. I think there was 34,000 there that day, and I have to say it. I know I'm an Ipswich fan. Ipswich were excellent away at Leeds, and again, it's one of those moments where Mick didn't double down on passing football, because he starts off with a 4-4-2, and you've got Ward, Adeyemi, and Nydam all playing in midfield, with McGoldrick, as he naturally does, comes back into the 10 position. And they pass the ball beautifully. And I can make a litany of excuses. Leeds scored with their first chance. Then Ipswich went on top. We're on top for 10 minutes. McGoldrick scored. And then Leeds scored straight away, straight from the centre, I think 1 minute apart. And then our wonderful goalkeeper, who I love, but is not beyond criticism, literally throws one over his old line, as McCarthy has got Waghorn and Selina lined up to come on. He's about to make his attacking move. It goes 2-1. Ipswich are on top for the rest of the game, and Garner scores. And of all the away games I saw, Joe, they were excellent. They really, and Adeyemi Ward looked great, stretching them down the right hand side. They passed the ball, they scored goals. But what are your thoughts?
And I think at this point, Leeds were right up in the top six as well, wasn't it?
I think they went top that day.
They went top that day.
I think they did. Yeah.
Tough place to go, and a big crowd. We had a young team. So Tristan Nydam was still 17 at the time, playing in front of 30,000 fans. Didn't seem to faze him. And like you said, we played well. We passed it well. There was some good football. We created chances. And I think that's all the fans have been crying out for at that point. And everyone was really positive after that day, despite the result. I think sometimes just scoring 2 goals is a good thing, even if you lose. If you score 2 goals, more often than not, you won't lose.
No, absolutely. And I think it just bugged me that, we'll talk about the next game, but you didn't see that intent a lot for the rest of the season. But nonetheless, I thought really good performance at Leeds, and I think a few things conspired against them. There's plenty of times where we lose, where I'll say, no, we deserve to lose, but that wasn't one of them. One thing I did think happened that day is McCarthy got taught about 4-2-3-1, because we hadn't seen it yet, and Leeds had lined up with Alioski and Saiz and Hernandez all behind Lasogga. So we get to this Sunderland game, which is basically one of the most exciting nights of the season, and Mick's got a new game to play with. He's going to try and do a 4-2-3-1 because he's just been beaten by it, basically. So a lot of us had kind of said, well, hang on a minute, why don't you just stick Garner up front and play that row of 3 behind him? So all of a sudden you get McGoldrick was off to the left, Waghorn was off to the right, and Selina in the hole where he can, like you said, do the least damage to us behind the front. But the 2 in midfield were Skuse and Adeyemi, so you've got a box-to-box guy and a bit of movement around Skuse, which obviously the famous Scugless was, not not in that. Yeah, okay, enough said. But tell me, were Sunderland terrible? Were Ipswich good? I've got down that this was the best performance by Waghorn, by an Ipswich player, all all season in that game. And did you not come away from that game thinking, okay, screw it, play 4-2-3-1, put all of those four guys on the pitch. You might lose 3-1 some weeks, but they're all on there, and they all Waghorn scores, Selena scores, McGoldrick scores. Waghorn gets basically 3 assists, McGoldrick gets 1, Garner gets 1. Tell me about Sunderland at home.
It was a brilliant game. It was probably the most enjoyable home game of the season, where we just looked like we were going to score goals every time we went forward. We weren't. I don't know. It seems like too often we were worried more about what we did when we didn't have the ball than when we did have the ball. Where this one, it was just a case we were going to attack. We were going to go forwards. The three you mentioned behind Garner were interchanging and swapping positions, and they were doing exactly what they wanted to do, but were also really disciplined as well. When one went, the other went across. They really played well as a three, and there seemed to be a real understanding between them. Garner had one of those games where he was bullying the defender the whole way through. And while Sunderland, I think the second half they were poor, they'd lost the plot by that point, and while they did score one brilliant goal back, there was a few there's a bit of a comedy of errors in the midfield leading to some of our chances. But at that point, we'd blown them away by that point. They were gone, and the first half was sort of the first half like we haven't seen, especially at home. I sit in the south stand, and you don't score many goals. We don't score many goals down that end of the pitch because we don't score many goals in the first half. And I think at one point there was probably 10 or 12 games where we didn't score down in that goal. Where this one we scored the 3 first half goals or the 2 first half goals, and like I say, they were just excellent. Waghorn. I think what cost us a formation going forwards was that Waghorn wasn't disciplined enough on that right-hand side. So McGoldrick went across there, and then McGoldrick, while still playing well, wasn't able to do the damage. So by compensating what we had, we ended up sort of going away from it.
And we're going to find out more of what cost us that formation. So this is the last game we're going to deal with. So it's Bristol City at home. And this was just like the come down of all come downs, wasn't it? So you think you've just found a new system. You've got all the guys on the pitch. Waghorn seems to have waved his flag and said, "Look, I'm Mr. First Teamer here. I need to play." You've thrashed Sunderland. Here you go, Bristol City at home. We'd had a good laugh at Bristol City the season before. Had gone like months with only winning one game and nearly got relegated right up until the end. And this, I've written down here, this always seemed to happen under McCarthy. When you think you found a system, something bad happens, and he goes, no, we're changing it, and we're gonna. Seemed like we didn't really ever stick with anything for that long. And again, I sound like I'm making excuses. It was a bit of a perfect storm because they score a deflected goal after 2 minutes. They were very. I've also written down they were one of the most surprising teams I saw because they were way better than I expected them to be. They're 2-0 up. I think Waghorn gets one back before half time, and then a breakaway goal at the end. Talk to me about. I mean, you already mentioned it. The ditching of the system and the Tom Adeyemi mystery begins because he's warming up before the game and then he disappears. Did he actually come back after that one?
Yeah, he played the Norwich game after that.
Oh, okay.
I think he played one more game after that. So I say where I sit, I have a team sheet brought round to me, and so Tom Adeyemi is on the team sheet, and then maybe like 20 minutes later, there's word that Adeyemi isn't playing. Nydam's now playing because he's injured himself in the warm-up, and after the game, it's just he's just a little tweak on his hamstring, and he'll be back sort of the week after, and he is. But then you don't see him again. Tristan Nydam comes into the team, and within 2 minutes the ball smacks him in the face and it's in the back of our net. And while I think Nydam went on to play well that day, he isn't Adeyemi and he doesn't have the physicality in the midfield to play in that system. And again, what you're saying with Mick about going away from systems, it seems that if we have good luck with us, that doesn't affect his thinking with regards to the system. We have a bit of bad luck against us, and the system goes out the window because, like I say, he came out after the game saying that 2 of the goals were hugely lucky because they were. The first goal was a huge deflection, and the third goal was a huge deflection. The linesman put his flag up for offside, but that was ruled off because the ball had actually hit Knudsen rather than their player, and it was just two incredibly lucky goals which cost us against a side that at that point were flying. And from that point, we effectively battened down the hatches at that point. Sort of looking at some of the stats at that point, I did make some notes on this. At that point, at the end of that game, we were 8th with 18 points from 10 games, with a game in hand on everyone around us, which we did subsequently win that game in hand at Derby, which would have taken us to 3rd at that point after 11 games. We'd scored 20 goals in 10 games, and then over the rest of the season, we scored 37 in 36. So that was really the end of the free-flowing football. We lost the next two 1-0. Sort of spoiler alert for the second part of the season. We lost the next two.
3-5-2 at Sheffield United. It's 4-2-3-1, 2 games, 5-2 win, 1 defeat, and
yeah, back in. Well, there was always a element of trying to match up with what the opposition were playing.
Chris Wilder, yeah, right.
Yeah, they played 3-5-2, so we go there and try and beat them at their own game.
But they've scored 100 points doing in League One the previous season, yeah.
And like I say, you lose to a good team who are in form, who got a bit of luck, and all of a sudden it's this isn't working. Where I could never tell you what formation, even throughout those first 10 games where we had some brilliant results. We must have played 7 different formations, and I can never tell you which one was the preferred formation at any point.
I think therein lies the whole problem. I'm lucky that I've got about 8 notepads down there with all the formations drawn out in, because I'm an absolute no. But you're totally right. There in those first, we've done 12 games. If you discount the 2 League Cup games because they're an outlier, aren't they? You have a 3-5-2 to start with, then a 3-5-2 in the next game. Then you go to this crazy 4-4-2. Then you go to a different type of 4-4-2 when you've got no centre backs. Then you go to a 4-2-3-1 for 2 games, and then you go back to a 3-5-2. It seemed, and I've said this before, that the previous manager thought it was more about him and what he was going to tweak during the game than any overarching philosophy that was going to go through 46 games.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And we just never settled into anything. We were always trying to stop the opposition first and then win it from there. I think the perfect Mick McCarthy game is 0-0 after an hour. We outrun the opposition, then we score 2 goals in the last half hour.
And he's the man of the match.
Change.
McCarthy's the man of the match, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not too sure on that side. I don't think he's too worried on that side. I just think he tries to stop them. Stopping them first is a number 1 point, and if that means you draw 0-0, then you draw 0-0. But hopefully it means you get the win. But there were a lot of times when the changes were too late to try and get the win, where he waited until the 80th minute to get it.
So to anyone who's listening and thinking, what are you two guys on about? This was the best part of the season. We won, I think, 7 games in this, and if you include the League Cup game, 8 games out of the 12. But you can see from what we're saying, in a kind of scattergun kind of way, yeah? Yeah,
well, it's difficult to look back at those games without the knowledge of what happened after those games and what had gone before them. It's hard to look at them in isolation, but there was all the talk. I'm not a huge fan of the expected goals model and those things, because I don't think they take into account sort of parts about how the actual game is played. If you're winning 1-0, you're not trying to score a second a lot of the time. Where when you looked at those, we were bottom of the league on expected goals, but top of it without it. And Waghorn, everything he touched had gone in. Garner had scored a lot of goals. I think away from home, we had every shot on target we'd had gone in for the first 5 games of the season. And while I don't think expected goals is the greatest model, it also, like I say, it does show that you're not going to keep up that scoring rate. Whatever model you're looking at, you aren't going to keep scoring every shot you have. That's an outlier, and I think it was quite obvious that we were outperforming where we should be, and that as soon as the sort of averages went back to what they should be, we weren't going to be scoring as many goals as we had been with the amount of chances we were creating.
And we'd only reached 8th place, like you said, with that in mind. So maybe the ultimate 12th place finish was expected. Right. Let's call that quits there, Joe. So the plan here is with these podcasts. I don't know when they'll all come out, but we're going to do the next 12 games. I can't remember whether it's Mikey or Statman making his on-screen debut. But Joe, we're going to see you on the podcast more next season.
Yep, I'm here and waiting whenever you need me.
He's here and waiting. So please, everybody, where can we find you on Twitter? What's your handle, Joe?
Just at Joe Fairs.
So go and follow Joe on Twitter because he's going to be joining the podcast team next season. Look out for the next 3 instalments of these. I don't quite know. We're a little bit all over the place. We'll try and get them done before the World Cup starts, but it's going to be 4 parts. And then for those of you who loved the segment, we'll try and do it with everybody. The player grades for the season, they always cause lots of nice arguments, which is especially when David McGoldrick's concerned with Dave and Statman tending to give him an A star whatever happens, but we'll see what they come up with this season. So Joe, thank you so much for coming on, and Blue Monday watchers and listeners, give Joe plenty of love because you're going to see him plenty of times next season. And normal plugs at Blue Monday ITFC on Twitter. This will be up on the YouTube, facebook.com, do, and the next one should be out, I would think, by the end of the week. That's a cross. Joe, impart some words of wisdom and say goodbye for us.
See you later, everyone, and look forward to a new season.
Absolutely. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you very soon.